Welcome back to the Four Gardens podcast. I'm Jake Ifshin. After a long break, it's good to be back and creating a new episode rooted in my current work as a socially responsible investment advisor. While this may seem like a departure from my past projects and other episodes of this podcast, for me, it feels like I'm going deeper into some of the original inspiration to make this show. The Four Gardens podcast was always about investing in yourself and growing as a person and finding meaning and balance. For me, it was also an investment in my community by featuring leaders, artists, and teachers and helping to promote their work. This year, a lot has changed for me. For one, I moved to New Mexico, and I've shifted my focus professionally to socially responsible impact investing. In my new role, I'm sharing how investing in the future can support a balanced, rewarding life while also creating a positive impact on the world. I recently wrote a blog on the Horizons website that I will link below, sharing more about my path into this field. In this episode, I discuss socially responsible impact investing with my colleague and mentor, Johann Klaassen. One reason I'm so excited about my work is that I get to collaborate and learn from Johann. Here's a little more about Johann's background. So Johann Klaassen, PhD, is CEO and Chief Investment Officer for Horizon Sustainable Financial Services, where he develops asset allocation strategies and oversees investment policy for Horizon's individual and institutional clients. As a passionate advocate for SRI, a skilled navigator of its intricacies, and an enthusiastic early adopter of just about every new communication tool and technology, Johann is informed, informative, and far more accessible than his many commitments might imply. He directly serves clients across the nation, tending to specialize in serving unusual and special circumstances or needs. Johann's a certified financial planner, and he's among the first in the nation to embrace the now standard certification of accredited investment fiduciary and holds the 70th such accreditation ever issued. He holds a BA from St. John's College, Annapolis and Santa Fe, and master's and PhD degrees from the Philosophy Department of Washington University, St. Louis, where he specialized in ethics and social philosophy. He served on the faculties of Washington University, Webster University, Millikan University, the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, the University of Central Arkansas, and the University of Idaho. He has published and lectured on many topics, including areas of environmental ethics, business ethics, and social bias in finance. Johann got a start in the security industry in the fall of 2000 at T. Rowe Price. In mid-2001, Johann joined the team at First Affirmative Financial Network, rising to Vice President of Investment Services. He was primarily responsible for First Affirmative's managed account programs and supported First Affirmative's nationwide network of investment advisors. Johann spent his youth in Western Washington, Hawaii, and Japan. He enjoys baseball, chess, and outdoor activities across the Rocky Mountains. He continues to write and publish for both academic and popular press outlets. He is a frequent guest lecturer in philosophy departments and business schools and at business and social justice conferences. In our conversation, Johann shares an answer to the question, what is socially responsible impact investing? And we talk about three of the widespread misconceptions people have about it. We discuss how we work at Horizons and who we serve, and the massive intergenerational wealth transfer that is happening over the coming years. Johann shares about his background in philosophy, and we riff on ethics, faith, money, and some other light topics. It's good to be back, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with Johann Klaassen. Johann, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today, having this conversation with me.
You bet. Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to do this and looking forward to sharing with our audience what we do here at Horizons and what social responsibility is, SRI investing, and also, get into a little bit of your story and how you got into it yourself and your background.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Let's start with SRI. What do we mean when we talk about socially responsible impact investing?
Yeah, there's a lot of different words that people use to talk about the same basic thing. We call it sometimes sustainable, responsible impact investing. Socially responsible investing was the words we used for a long time. Ethical investing, values-based investing, any of a number of words can be used to describe the same basic project. The idea is that we can embed our values in our portfolio, or express maybe better our values in our portfolio, in the holdings that we have, in the positions that we take, but also in what we do with those with our assets, what we do with those positions. So when we talk about it, we usually talk about four different sorts of pieces to the sustainable investment puzzle. One of them is the one that most people think of is screening, right? Taking objectionable companies out of a portfolio. Um, but so negative screening is an important part of what we do, keeping out, whatever, if there's some particular industry that a particular client doesn't want to have in their portfolio, we can do that. Most of the mutual funds and advisors sub-advisors that we work with have a set of comprehensive social screens that take out the alcohol, tobacco, firearms, pornography. A lot of them take out genetically modified organisms. Nuclear power is common. So there's a handful of those kinds of screens that give us a sort of fundamental, comprehensive baseline to work from. What people don't think of, though, is the positive screening. Once you've taken those companies out, what else are you going to invest in? So we try to add in particular, I don't want to say overweighting, but a particular emphasis on certain kinds of companies that are doing positive things, right? So we have negative screening to get out the bad actors, positive screening to keep in the good actors. Screening is one part of what we do, and that's the one that most people think of. But for those companies that we own in a portfolio that we might not be exactly happy about in some respects, we also use a technique, a strategy called shareholder advocacy. Because we own the shares of the company, we have a seat at the table. So we can go to those companies and say to their management, hey, you guys are doing the following kinds of things. Those are questionable at best. Here's a moral reason. Here's an ethical reason. Here's a social justice oriented reason to quit doing those things. And here's the business case, sure. um, but so we get that opportunity because we own the shares of the companies that we might not like. Now, there are some companies, some gigantic companies in particular, who they don't care. They don't want to talk to us. And so they don't, they receive the letters and they throw them in the bin. But there are others that do listen, that do, respond to us and want to make their businesses better. So it's tremendous power that we wield with that it's the one thing that we have that actually drives corporate behavior. Because they don't
One
care.
reason
I'm sorry.
oh yeah, and one reason I'm motivated to do this work, and I know it's been your work for over 2 decades, is the more power, the more people we get involved in this effort, the more the volume of that voice increases that we have at the table, the power of that voice, and some of these bigger companies will start to have to listen and have accountability to investors.
Yeah, exactly. They don't, some of those big companies that get excluded from our portfolios, they don't really care that they're excluded because there's plenty of other investors out there who are happy to buy their stocks. But um, we can make changes to corporate behavior for some companies anyway, some corporations, by doing this kind of work, by doing that shareholder advocacy. The third strategy that we use in sustainable investment is community investment strategies. These are microcredit kinds of approaches where we make investments that lend money into communities that have a hard time raising capital otherwise. They might be underserved, underbanked. They might be international. Some of them are inside the United States, some are outside. But it's always aiming ways of aiming capital into communities that need capital, that need to borrow money, but have a hard time doing it through the sort of traditional channels. Banks don't want to lend to them for whatever reason. A lot of it is race related, some of it is class related, and some of it is just they don't think that investments in whichever part of the world it is are worth the risk. But the community development financial institutions that we work with do undertake that. They undertake those risks and they end up with, better repayment rates than traditional banks. And we end up doing a lot of good in actual communities and changing the lives of actual individual human beings. So, in some respects, screening doesn't do a lot in terms of changing corporate behavior, but that's okay. We have this shareholder advocacy work that we can do to change corporate behavior. Community development investments change individual human lives and communities around them. The fourth strategy that we use in sustainable investment is some of the real exciting, sexy private equity kind of people have been calling it impact investment recently in the last few years, where we can actually do things like invest in regenerative agriculture or other, in really interesting early stage venture capital kinds of things. Those kinds of investments are not broadly available to all of our clients. We have to be able to use those, a client has to be an accredited investor, which means they have to have a specified amount of investable assets and a specified income. So they're not as widely available as we would like, but we're working on some ways to get them into more and more of our client portfolios. So again, it's a different approach. It's a way to put money into very high impact, new stuff, new, interesting, sexy approaches to changing the world. So,
Something I like about those four strategies is that it allows us to meet people where they are with how much
yeah,
energy they want to put in to their
yeah,
investing. So someone who wants to be really active and innovative and learning all the time, like they have a lot of energy for this. They can be involved in that fourth strategy. They can be involved. They have the capital to invest. They can do a lot of sophisticated things. For
mhm,
someone also who maybe is doing, we just spoke with a client who's doing a social impact business that her energy is dedicated to that,
yeah,
one of my new clients, and so she doesn't have a lot of time to manage her portfolio and is trusting us to do that. But she can know we're working with a firm like ours her that she screened out the companies that she doesn't want to have in there. That she can know that at least while she's doing her good work, that her money is not working against the purpose and the values that she holds.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So there's definitely not a one size fits all piece to this, and I think that's also part of the importance of having an advisor is to find the right strategy for you and how you fit in this world.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, one of the criticisms that people have levied against sustainable investment over the last decade or so is that, well, there's not one definition of what sustainable investment means. Seems like everybody's doing something a little bit different, and there's not one central thing that we can get at. And that, far from being a criticism, in my opinion, that's a strength, right? That we're not doing just one thing, we're doing lots of different things. And yeah, there are some approaches that we might not be comfortable as a company undertaking. There are some kinds of screening that we might not want to do because it conflicts with our values. But we can serve, the vast majority of clients, meet them where they are on understand their ethical principles, and put together a portfolio that matches that.
I think that's interesting to reflect on that. The same way our clients, there's not a one size fits all for our clients. We also are finding we have a role in this ecosystem of investment advisors where we know our specialties, and we'll get into that too. What Horizons, the values of Horizons, and the way
Yeah,
we work. I think before we get there, I also want to address. You've already brought up alluded to some of these, but some of the misconceptions around SRI investing, around some of the ideas around fiduciary responsibility, or around the returns that are possible with SRI
yeah,
investing. I want to address those at the outset because I get a lot of questions on that.
yeah. Well, it's if you go to an investment advisor who doesn't know a terrible lot about sustainable investments, one of the first things you'll hear is something along the lines of that I can't do that. It's contrary to my fiduciary duty. And when you ask why, if you know to ask why, I guess, the reason that is usually offered is, well, because it changes the universe of investable securities, it limits those, therefore it creates almost mechanically creates underperformance. And of course, my job as a fiduciary is to earn as much money as possible for you. Um, and I've written a couple of scholarly essays on this, published in philosophical slash financial journals. There are a few of those. Um, but Our actual fiduciary obligations as investment advisors don't require us to earn as much money as possible. That doesn't make any sense because then everybody would be in all the riskiest stocks and the riskiest things that we could think of to invest in. Our obligation is to find the right mix of assets, the right mix of securities, of investable things to meet the client's goals, right? To stand the best chances to meet the client's goals. And realistically, when it comes down to it, that's about processes and procedures, not about individual investments, specific investments. So we don't have to worry too much about our fiduciary duties. We can have a prudent process that includes investing for sustainability. And if then the non-sustainability oriented advisor says, okay, well, what about the performance question? Surely giving up the opportunity to make money with these questionable companies is just a way to make sure that you lose money compared to the rest of the market. And that's just, it turns out to be, that's not the case. One of the best things that we can point to is well, it's now known as the MSCI KLD 400 Social Index. It's a mouthful. But the thing to remember is KLD 400, because you can search on that and find information about it. And we'll put a link in the comments, in the notes. The KLD, it used to be known as the Domini Social 400 Index. It was created in 1994, early in the year. And so it's been running for 30 years now. The performance has been, well, some years it's ahead, some years it's behind. The broad market indexes, like, well, MSCI wants to compare it to their MSCI USA index. Most of the rest of us want to compare it to the S&P 500 because more people know about that one. But when we compare it to these broad market indexes, we find that the performance is almost indistinguishable, especially over the longer periods. That the occasional quarter by quarter or year by year outperformance or underperformance averages out over over a longer time period. And if anything, where the sustainability oriented index, the Domini index, is a little bit ahead of the plain market indexes. So we don't have to worry about that. The last thing that people usually ask us about is surely it doesn't do any good. Or what difference does it make if you're doing, if you're screening your portfolio and you're keeping the bad actors out? Well, what difference does that make to you, to the world, whatever? And yeah, as I said, screening probably doesn't matter all that much. There was some really interesting research a few years ago about what percentage of investors would have to be involved in the negative screening campaign in order for it to make a difference to the stock price. And it's some ridiculously high percentage. But I wish I could remember who it was who'd done that study. But screening is not the end of the story, right? We just covered that. We have all these other techniques. Shareholder advocacy does change corporate behavior. Community investment changes individual human lives. Impact investment, the high social impact investment, that private equity stuff helps get innovative, new, exciting companies off the ground. So those kinds of things clearly do make a difference. And one of the things that we're working on this year at Horizons is putting together an impact report for our clients and for anybody who might be interested in looking at it to show with actual numbers and actual examples some of the actual impacts that substantial, interesting impacts that we have had because of our investments. We're not sure that report is in the hands of our graphic designers right now. They're putting together some interesting ideas for how to present these ideas to a lot of us, but that should be out, well, I hope before the end of the year.
We'll make sure to share that. I think about SRI and I hear these same three objections to it. You referenced all three of them, or same three resistances to
Yeah.
that too. And it's interesting that people almost have some disbelief that this is possible, that they can, one, make a difference, two, still make money and save for retirement, build wealth. It's important to have access to markets, and they can do it without a heavy conscience. They can
Yeah.
do it knowing that they're not going against their values. And I don't know. I think it's interesting too to trace why how these are some deeply rooted assumptions. There almost needs to be extraction happening to be making money in the markets, and I
Yeah.
think that's an assumption that we should be challenging. I think in our profession, and I think a lot of great people in our field and our work is to challenge some of these assumptions people have about and question them. These assumptions people have
Yeah.
about money and investing.
Well, yeah, and it's a very old argument too, right? So that's actually a good segue. I like it because it goes back to one of the first books that you and I each read when we were freshmen at St. John's College, right up the hill here, was The Republic, Plato's Republic, right? And in book one of Plato's Republic, the bad guy in the dialogue is Thrasymachus, and he says, "Well, why shouldn't I? Surely the best thing for me to do is to profit wherever I can, to take whatever power I can manage to arrange, and that's the best way to benefit myself and my friends and my family and probably the whole city." And of course, Socrates spends the rest of the Republic trying to explain why that's not the case. But that's parallel to this same question, right? Is why should I not invest in all these things that are technically legal but morally questionable, damaging to the environment, harmful to social justice? Why don't I go ahead and make short-term profits on these things? And then, that'll be best for me. And if all of us do that, then it'll be best for all of us. And yeah, we'll hurt some people along the way and we'll do some damage to the environment, but maybe we can clean up after ourselves later. That's 2,500 years later, we're still having to fight that same battle against Thrasymachus and those who want to profit from legal wrongdoing, things that are technically allowable but shouldn't be, maybe. Legal but not moral.
I think part of the awareness we want to grow, because we think now that dialogue continues, right? That same dialogue is happening, and
Yeah.
we're guides in that work, and we want to have a seat at the seat at the table when
Yeah.
these conversations are being had among corporations, within corporations. That's part of the work. Part of the arguments, we need to use all the different arguments and tools at our disposal. In
Yeah.
particular, looking at how this pursuit of short-term profit and gain long-term impacts companies. Even in medium term, we see the impact on the weather right now, on real estate, on people's lives that are happening through climate change,
Hmm.
through microplastics, through it's here already. The challenges and the impact on supply chains that we've seen, the impact on consumers, and just so many different levels. So I think a lot of this
Yeah.
too is helping people step back, realize that we're in this together. The advantage of the stronger, the short-term game, the view of just simply getting mastery over resources and short-term extraction
Hmm.
is going to affect not just our children but us right now, next year and 5 years. We're living with the feedback loop is becoming shorter and shorter, and it seems like that would strengthen our arguments that we need to think big picture here.
Yeah, and the social justice questions have to come up too, because if we're feeding into a society that is thinking in short term, thinking of me, thinking of however we want to define a small us, then we get the kinds of problems that lead to Black Lives Matter, that lead to the horrific kind of anti-Semitism that we've seen the last couple of years. And we see the kind of blowback against, against the kind of sustainable investment that we do. They're calling it ESG, anti-ESG stuff, anti-woke capital. Um, we're seeing a lot of political stuff that's blowing back against us right now. And if we take a long enough time frame, and maybe the time frame is getting shorter, but if we take a long enough time frame, we can't address questions of environmental sustainability without also addressing the same kind of questions about social justice. That has to go hand in hand. And that's an important and exciting part of our work. Yeah, we spend a lot of time trying to draw those links, trying to draw those connections, and help people see that there are solutions. out there, that there are things we can do to make the world a better place and to
I
make
think
sure that there is a planet for our kids or our grandkids.
right, I think expanding the conversation to different stakeholders, expanding who's included based on race, class, gender, to we think about these important conversations. If we're cutting out 90% of the room, we're cutting out people who are feeling the downstream impacts of
Mhm.
corporate decisions
Yeah.
from the boardroom conversations. I know that's one of the best tools of activist investing is to, I know, for example, on the Deep Impact podcast, I love the interview with Jonas Krohn, I believe, from Trillium.
Jonas Krohn. Yeah.
Jonas Krohn, yeah, talks about bringing activists to the table. The common practice they do will bring the activists, the impacted individuals
Hmm.
from Louisiana was the one example he gave, bringing voices that are marginalized to
Hmm.
the front in shareholder meetings. Because if you own part of a company, you have a voice. So there's
Yeah.
all these ways activist investing or putting pressure for more diverse hiring or more inclusive hiring internally.
Hmm.
And you could still have of course, still have a company where all the faces look different. They're not all just old white men. They could still be doing extractive things.
Yeah.
They still need to be accountability. You can still, have diversity and extraction happening together. But I think generally the trend is if you're moving, my opinion is that, and I like to see the research in this too, but the trend is if we're moving towards a more diverse and inclusive shareholder base and decision maker
Hmm.
corporate board, we're going to see better overall decisions around the environment and around inclusion and around impact.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is some research out there that indicates that the more diverse the board and the C-suite are of a corporation, the better the performance is over the longer time periods. Having more voices means better decisions, and better decisions means a better company, better performance.
Not surprised to hear that. I'm going to shift gears a little bit too and talk about how we do that at Horizons, talk about Horizons, the firm itself,
Mhm.
and how we work here. In particular, you already alluded to some of the strategies we
Yeah.
use here, but just I think I want to give people more an introduction to our work here in particular.
Okay. Well, where should we start?
Well, I want to start I know we recently became a New Mexico benefit corporation.
That's
And
right.
so
Yeah.
internally, how we're kind of reflecting some of these values we talk about, how do we become a model for the change we want to see in companies that we own and invest in?
Yeah, so earlier this year, we re-registered Horizon Sustainable Financial Services Incorporated. We re-registered with the state of New Mexico as a New Mexico Benefit Corporation. Um, that's not the same as the B Corp certification, but it's a preliminary step toward that. So we have to become a benefit corporation before we can become a B Corp. Uh, but what it means is that in our official legal documents about who the company is or what the company is, we say that we have multiple ultimate goals, right? Yes, we want to make a profit, but we also want to have a specific kind of social benefits for our clients. And so we had to say, well, what are those? What kind of benefits are we going to offer? And our key benefit is that we are allowing our clients to express their values through their portfolios and to make the world a better place as a result. So that's part of why we're building that impact report this summer, this fall, is to be able to say, okay, so these are the impacts that we're actually having. These are the values that our clients are embodying or in their portfolios, and these are the kinds of real world tangible impacts those decisions that our clients are making are having. So that's, as I say, it's a step along the way toward getting the B Corp certification. We'll get there, but there's some hoops to jump through and some paperwork to fill out. But that was essentially the becoming a New Mexico Benefit Corporation was a matter of paperwork. But we got that set up. And yeah, we are moving in the direction of embodying, of demonstrating what our values are to the B Corp, the B Labs folks, so that we can be certified for that. There are a couple of other things that we're working on too with regard to corporate charitable giving, giving a portion of our profits to organizations around New Mexico that are making New Mexico a better place to live, that are trying to encourage social justice here in New Mexico. Um, so those are, right now, those are the kind of early examples of some of the things that we're working on.
And when we think about how we work to who we work with, how we are structured, of course, as part of that, the B Corp, the output and the structure and the impact of the corporation is, of course, upfront. But we also think about people ask this about Horizons. Oh, do you work with corporations? Do you do retirement plans? Do you do like who like thinking of like maybe just describing a little bit about our clients in particular and how we help them?
Yeah, most of our clients are individuals, primarily. We do have a handful of smaller nonprofits and other kinds of organizations that we work with, and there are a few small retirement plans that we work on too for some small local companies. But the bulk of our clients are in individual families, households. We serve about 400 different families, households altogether, between ourselves internally and our advisors that are spread around the country, and some of our affiliated advisors who work with other firms. That totals to about $160 million in assets under management. It's probably a little higher now. The last time I looked, it was 160. So our average client is about $400,000. So we're not working with huge clients. We're not working with the massively wealthy necessarily. We do have a few very large clients, but we also have a very large number of very small clients too. And when we set up Horizons 12 years ago now, we made a conscious decision to say, let's not have an account minimum, right? Because we don't want well, we want to be able to serve everyone who needs financial advice, who needs help with their investment strategies, with preparing for retirement, so on. And so if we said, oh, well, we can't work with you unless you have hundreds of thousands of dollars, well, there would be a whole lot of people that who we could help, who we've chosen not to. And that just struck us as contrary to our desire for social justice, right? We want to be able to help everybody who needs it. And even people with little assets, small assets, still need help with their investment strategies.
Something I admire about Horizons and drew me to work here too is that no minimum policy because it allows me to work with younger people too, who tend not to have the
Yeah.
assets. Some of my peers are younger people in my family and friend group who want to get started investing and build financial literacy that I get to begin work with them. So I really
Mhm.
appreciate that. And I think one other area around this, though, is we think about age groups we work with and the demographics who we work with.
Yeah.
Something you and I have been talking about is the wealth transfer, the intergenerational piece. And so I know working with families, I'd love to hear from you about how we think about that wealth
Yeah.
transfer from older to younger and what to do with sudden wealth.
Yeah, there's been for a long time now, there's been articles in the financial services press about how, oh, we should all be prepared for the coming wave of intergenerational wealth transfer, that baby boomers are retiring and beginning to die, and so their assets are passing to the next generation. It's been moving a lot more slowly than those sort of breathless think pieces initially were claiming. So we have more time though, that means, to make it go smoother. We've been working and we plan to work over the next 2 or 3 years on figuring out good ways to approach different families, to say, as our clients age, to be able to say, okay, we have established beneficiaries on your IRA accounts. We have established beneficiaries in your regular taxable accounts. They're marked for transfer on death now. So who are these beneficiaries? We should talk to them too. We should help them to know who we are, so that they can understand what our strategies are, why we've been doing what we've been doing for you, dear client, so that when you pass away, these things aren't a surprise to anybody, right? That we come to, I mean, I guess it's always a bit of a surprise, but so that the transition can happen more smoothly. That's helpful to us because it helps us to understand who the beneficiaries are and whether they have specific ideas about what they want to do with the money they're about to inherit. Maybe they want to pay off a mortgage. Maybe they want to invest it for their kids' education. Maybe they have some specific ideas of things they want to do with this money. But maybe they just want to keep it with us and keep it, as keep it invested in roughly the same way that it has been. And that's important to have those conversations so that the beneficiaries understand the not just the monetary value of the legacy that our clients are leaving them, but also the social and ethical legacy as well. So it's a
That's
project. It's in process, I should say. It's something we're working on trying to figure out, and it's probably not going to be, as we were saying earlier, it's probably not going to be a one size fits all. We're probably going to find that different families require different kinds of approaches, and that different sets of beneficiaries want different information about the way the money has been managed, and how it could be managed in the future, and those kinds of things. So I anticipate that we're going to find that we need several different approaches, different approach for every different family, maybe.
I think we're particularly well qualified, speaking of this firm and you and I specifically too, to hold the conversation. Something I feel inspired to do in the future is to bring groups together, particularly families together, whether they're our current clients or their prospective and new clients coming in, where
Mhm.
we can. So in the case of a new client, I think it'll be exciting as we do this work and there's more transfers to look at even just let's do an ethical analysis of what your current portfolio is. So you were left money or you have aging parents that want to leave you money.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
might be caught up in some old paradigm thinking. It might be invested highly contrary to your values, to what you want to be investing in.
Yeah.
And so just even taking the time with us to take a look at what's in there, what's the
Mhm.
impact score on these things. We have the tools to do that, to look into
Yeah.
your portfolios and analyze them. So I feel inspired to first use our analytical tools to help new inheritors realign portfolios. I think as ideally families come in before someone passes away and we can help hold the space for a good conversation to make investments together. It's actually
Mhm.
something I'm doing in the recent years. And now with Horizons, I'm going to be doing this with my immediate family. We're planning to make an investment with Horizons where we can come together, fill out, when you become a new client at Horizons, you fill out a social policy questionnaire and a financial worksheet to see what our financial, learn about how much risk tolerance our clients have and learn about what their values are. We'll talk about this more. To do that as a family, to do a version of that, or my family plans to do a version of that together. And something
Mhm.
I want to invite other families to do is, if you do it on your own, and we're here to help you too, to have a conversation around, if you can't, if you need support, we're here to help you to come together and think about as a family, what values do we share and want to invest around, and
Mhm.
what are our financial needs and goals in the future. Is, it could be things around long-term care issues, it could be issues around, retirement or education goals we have for children and grandchildren. There's so much
Mhm.
that needs to just be discussed in a group. And so
Yeah.
I feel excited. I think you feel excited, Johan, right, to have help families have those conversations.
Oh yeah, exactly. I've had a couple of those kinds of conversations with some of our client families just in the last few months. Being able to sit down with the current clients and their kids via Zoom or something like that, some kind of a on the phone or on Zoom or sometimes in person. But being able to sit down and say, these are the things that are going on. This is what Pat and Martha are up to, and this is what the kids are doing, and this is how we're thinking. And here's some of the transitional concepts that we can apply to the way we manage these accounts. We can begin the process of shifting some things so that they reflect the kids' values as well as the parents. So
I think it's a great way to come together for families and learn about each other. So we're definitely available for that. You can reach out to either of us
yeah,
to start that process. I want to also now take some time. You have a really interesting background. I feel like we've covered a lot about what we do here at Horizons, and we're going to keep talking about that and
yeah,
available to talk about that more. But I want to take some time to learn about you more, where you're from, and kind of how you got into this work.
yeah. Well, it was yeah, one question of, well, why would you want to have this kind of a conversation about values and money with somebody like Johann? Well, Um, so start from the most recent, I guess. I am a certified financial planner. I'm an accredited investment fiduciary, which means I know how to manage those fiduciary duties. But I'm also, before that, a PhD in ethics and social philosophy. My dissertation was about moral emotions. So I have a whole lot of experience in talking in understanding the concepts of, how people come to their understanding of their own ethical commitments. And I have a lot of understanding about how that plays out into how it can play out into their portfolios, but also um, how financial structures, how market structures change the way societies are organized, and vice versa. So, there's a whole lot of that kind of deep understanding and knowledge that we bring to the table when we have these kind of conversations. Um, should I work backwards, or one of the things that one of my favorite philosopher quotes is from Soren Kierkegaard, the great Danish philosopher of the 19th century. In one of his notebooks, he wrote that life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards, right? So we can really only understand, in some respects, how we have lived our lives in retrospect, but we have to make our decisions, we have to make our choices in the moment as we're going along. I grew up in Western Washington in the forests outside of Seattle. Um, it was a very wet childhood. Um, One of my earliest memories is standing outside, waiting for a bus to take me to school, standing in the rain, just being damp. Um, but so I grew up out there. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go to a private high school in Tacoma, Washington. And then I came to St. John's here in Santa Fe for my undergraduate degree. I went to Washington University for my graduate degree in philosophy. I've been doing After graduating from Washington University, I did a couple of years of teaching at various universities, kind of moving back and forth across the country, waiting to see if a tenure track position would open up in roughly my part of the my specialty, and it just didn't. And so my wife and our daughter and I decided, well, we'll move back to Colorado and see what happens. And what happened was we got back to Colorado, and I found my way to a small firm in Colorado Springs called First Affirmative Financial Network, which is still one of the larger companies in the sustainable investment industry. I worked for them for 11 years, a little more, um, during which time, I spent a lot of time here in Santa Fe. I would come down here with my wife and our kids anytime we had an opportunity, really. Um, and I got to know Kimberly Griego Kyle, who was the Santa Fe office of First Affirmative. And she and I talked for a while. And one of the things we realized after a little while was that she and I could split off from First Affirmative, form our own firm, become independent, and be able to do a better job of serving our clients for lower their fees a little bit, and actually be able to, build our own business here independently here in Santa Fe. So we did that in 2013 was when we started this new version of Horizon Sustainable Financial Services. And that means we've been going for what, almost 12 years now. Um, Kim had to retire a couple of years ago for health reasons. And so I took her stake in the company and have been, running it since. We've added a few people here and there. We added some advisors elsewhere in the country a few years ago. We started adding those. And the business has grown greatly over these years. So we're very pleased to be in this position.
Pleased to be here. And I want to give a shout out to Kim and the Deep Impact Investing podcast, which we will
Yeah.
link below. There's many episodes and
105, I think, something like that. More than 100 episodes. So,
100 plus episodes for you to listen to.
yeah.
One of the reasons I'm working here is because I got to listen to Johann and Kim on that podcast. And so it's a great resource for people to learn and grow from that. So check out the link below if you're enjoying this conversation and you want more some deep impact investing talk.
Right.
So listen to that, please. And let's talk about philosophy. I want to hear a little more, just generally open up here. We've had some quite philosophical conversations. I love that we share this background of St. John's. And we also have Aaron working here, our chief compliance officers, a St. John's grad. So it's really fun for me to be working where I would say St. John's to me, the approach of figuring things out together, reading the same text. Part
Mhm.
of what I do at Horizons is borrow Johann's books. So you see all Johann's library behind
Yeah.
him. I've got 3 checked out right now of the Johann library, and it's just really fun for me to be with in a climate where we're talking about ideas. We're reading books around. We have this shared background of the great books, but we're reading books here and having conversations, figuring it out together. We're not. I've already found in my time at Horizons the St. John's quality here of we're exploring and learning together. We're not imposing ideas on each other or on our clients, but the idea is to have a conversation, have a little seminar. So that's something I really value. So I guess to shift this to you, this open it up of hearing a little bit of like how St. John's has shaped your approach up till now, and even like getting into some all the philosophical work you've done, how that kind of comes into your work today.
Sure. Yeah. Interestingly, my wife is a Johnny too. We actually met, we were in the math class in our freshman year together. So, and we've been together since. And I met Aaron maybe a week before I met my wife because he was in the suite next to ours in the dorms, next to mine. So I've known a lot of Johnnies for a very long time. One of the things, yeah, thinking about it, part of the most important thing that I got out of St. John's, I think, was the ability to have an argument in the technical sense, but also in the personal sense, without getting personal, without being, nasty, without attacking the other person, which is a tremendous value in a marriage, in a business relationship, in all kinds of respects, right? To be able to have a conversation about deeply important things respectfully and with understanding, and yet being willing to be challenging, right? To challenge the assumptions that we are making or that others are making, and to use those um, conversational techniques that we practiced and honed for so long at St. John's. That was a vital thing for us, for me. In terms of philosophically speaking, I think at various points I've written stuff about different kinds of um, ethical criteria that we might apply, different ways to understand our obligations to one another, whether it be a virtue ethics approach or a utilitarian approach or an approach based on rights and duties. Um, those different kinds of ways to understand our obligations to one another or how we need to live together and how we can work together to make our world a better place. Those are really important, and a lot of people don't really spend a terrible lot of time thinking about those questions, but I guess I do. So, um, So that, that means that I'm able to go into those conversations saying, okay, so the reasons that you're offering sound kind of like you're basing this decision on these kinds of reasons. Tell me more about that. And that allows us to, if anything, to do a better job of tailoring portfolios to the client's desires, to the client's um, uh, actual ethical commitments, because we can get to understand them deeply, deeply enough to make connections to some other things. From here to there, we can make those connections so that the portfolios we build can actually, even better than they might have thought, embody the client's values.
Yeah, I want to reflect back two things I really appreciate here is one, St. John's lesson of not identifying with your ideas, because
Mhm.
your ideas at St. John's, you go through so many books and phases intellectually. I did.
Yeah,
You're reading a new book and becoming convinced or not convinced every week, it seems like,
yeah,
in
yeah,
seminar of a new idea or a new viewpoint, that you get less attached to your viewpoint, realize that we're not our ideas. Like our ideas can change, and that someone attacking, quote unquote, attacking or criticizing or breaking down or analyzing my idea is not me. My ego is not tied up in that idea the
yeah.
same way. And this personalization of discourse and over identification with our ideas, I think, is part of the root of the polarity problems in our society, the inability in our democracy right now to have
Could be.
good discourse and conversations. I think it's part of one of the St. John's makes claims around that of contributing to democracy. I think rightly that I think you can be a better citizen if you can have a better conversation or a better
Yeah,
with your neighbor.
yeah.
So I think this is like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say critical thinking is, a key, well, is a phrase that we can use to describe that too. The idea that we can think critically about some things, that it has been very difficult for Americans historically to think critically about. One of my favorite things when I was a professor back so many years ago, my hair was brown then. Um, One of my favorite things was usually every semester there would be one or two students in my introduction to ethics classes who I could see partway through the semester, a little light bulb would go off over their heads, right? And they had come to understand that there were ways to think about what makes something right or wrong that weren't necessarily, just, well, this is what I learned in Sunday school, or this is what I learned from my parents, or this is how I've always thought about these things. That there are different ways to talk about and to consider different kinds of ideas, and to bring together viewpoints that weren't your own, and to see if there are some pieces of them that you can bring together into your own ideas to make your own life richer and fuller. There usually one or two of these students every semester, I would see that little light go off. Um, so that was one of my favorite things about being a professor is watching that happen.
I love that too. Yeah, just the description of that experience definitely makes me smile. And the second thing I was going to reflect to you too is that I totally see that intellectual development that is potentially there. It doesn't happen for everybody, but
Yeah.
it's offered, it's encouraged at St. John's, and it sounds like in your teaching as well. And then this other piece of your background too around ethical philosophy, because you took it further than your average Johnny than I took it by getting a PhD in ethics. This the skill, the background you developed and uh, the readings you've done, the study you've done and writing around ethics and around doing analysis and thinking about how we can. I think the way you described it is like to me, it looks like how we could bring the pieces together. The way it implies to investing is what is the responsibility we have to each other, to the planet? How do we express these arguments and take them to a higher level? I think
Mhm.
your commitment to that in your background too is like seems to make you even more uniquely qualified for to be part and to lead some of these conversations we need to have now around the impact of our money and our investing, which makes such a force in shaping our world right now and how
Yeah.
we live.
Yeah, money is one of the biggest drivers right now of just about everything. And our society today is organized around our economy in a lot of really important ways. And that maybe that's not a good thing. It's almost certainly not a good thing to the degree that we've got it going right now. But it is how the world is today. And understanding that and using those tools, using that power that money has, um, using it to make the world a better place is better than just being passive and letting it happen to us.
Mhm.
So,
I'm seeing two phases in our work too of when we're working together to bring consciousness and awareness first. It seems like step one in our work of
mhm.
let's just pay attention to what we're investing in. Let's so much money now is passively invested and invested into retirement plans. 40 trillion was one of the last number I saw from 2023 of how much is in our retirement savings. So little control or awareness is invested we have over that. It's by design in some cases because it's
Mhm.
taking the power away from the small investor, in my opinion.
Mhm.
It's there's reasons, there's a lot to say about retirement plans, but I think when I look at our work and I think about first, it's just let's be aware is the way I see it.
Yeah.
Let's be conscious of where our money is. And then the second phase is, I think, what we're talking about here too. There's the consciousness, and then you're talking about the conscience. Once we're aware, then this is something I'm
Then what?
learning from you.
Yeah.
Then what? What do we do? How can our conscience be brought in to our money management? I think this is where the ethical philosophy for me is helping me by working with you.
Yeah, and that brings to mind two things for me too. One is that one of the things that I learned early on in this business is that all investment is future oriented, right? Even people who aren't investing with us with environmental sustainability and social justice in mind are investing for their future, right? For their retirement. And they're hoping that the money will grow well enough to provide them the things that they need when they're no longer able to work. So all investment is, in some respects, future oriented. Sustainable investment, the way we operate, the way we work on things, is intentionally future oriented, right? We're not just saying, well, we're investing for the future in order to make a future that, in order to have enough money to live down the road, but we're saying, what kind of a life do we want to live? What kind of a planet do we want to live on? What kind of people do we want to be working with, living with? Uh, who are our neighbors and why? And so we're trying to say there are ways to have those conversations. There are ways to invest that, yes, result in a portfolio, result in a retirement portfolio that we can live on, we hope, but also that create a world in which we're comfortable living, right? The second thing is that there's a friend of mine, Lynn Miller. Um, he retired, oh gosh, 10 or 15 years ago from Mennonite Mutual Aid. So he's probably a cousin too. That's my family background is in Mennonites. Um, but he worked for the Mennonite Mutual Aid as their chief theologian, one of the very few financial services companies that had a theologian on staff. But I remember at a conference once, he was on a panel, and he just reminded us all that money talks, right? That's just a platitude in our society. Money talks, and he said, "Well, what if God is listening?"
Mm.
So, yeah, that was one of those moments for me, and I'm breaking up
Mm.
because it's just a powerful idea. So, what if our money talks? What if God is listening to it?
Mm. Yeah, that's a powerful question and thought. And thinking too, I mean, immediately it brings up to me the history of religion and money is so like I could
Oh
it's
yeah.
something I'd love to study more too. Now, as I move into this deeper into this field, I'm sure you have a lot to say about it as well. But I think about the way, I mean, there's a lot, but to think about the way faith and religion, our faith and money are tied together, the way we give, the way we donate, the way we
Yeah.
I think it's just a place to look. I guess my first thought is just it's a place. How can we step back, whether it's through our religious organizations or our own spiritual practice, and make money not something that's segregated from that, and
Yeah.
not something that's That's over there. That person takes care of that for me. I think what I'd like to see in my clients too, and in our firm, and I think it's something we do, is let's not separate who we are, because our values are tied to our religion or to our faith for many of us. And so for me too, it's like what we believe and what we want to, whether it's what we want to pass on as in our legacy too. We think about
Yeah.
legacy
Yeah.
on the planet and for our family. I think trying to unify, I think, is part of what I'd like to see in this work as we learn and grow together. Can we unify? Can we bring together these different areas of our life and not feel like fate's here, money's there?
Right.
Because the
Yeah.
legacy of that we've inherited is not good, of separating these things from each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is too easy. Contemporary society makes it too easy for us to say, "Oh, my money is doing whatever my money is doing," and but I'm a good person. Here's the moral code I live by, whatever. But it is possible to bring these things together and to make sure that our money, that our investments, that our plans for the future are not destroying the possibility of that future, and that our money and our values, that our money can be aligned with our values.
I believe that, and that's the core of our work. So I'm
Yeah,
going to start to
it
wrap up
really is.
there, but I do want to leave people with information about how to work with Horizons and getting in touch. So if you could
Cool.
say, and we of course will have links so you can look below. But I love, for people who want to continue this conversation and want more resources and just where both of us are happy to connect and talk more. So maybe
Oh,
you could
yeah.
say more about for people interested.
Yeah, the easiest and best way to find out more about who we are and what we do, of course, is to look at our website. It's Horizons SFS, as Horizons plural, SFS as in sustainablefinancialservices.com. We have an extensive blog going back a decade, at least. And we have, as Jake mentioned, these 100 and some odd podcast episodes that Kim and I, well, mostly Kim, put together over the last 3 or 4 years. There's a tremendous amount of information in those places. There's some, important disclosure and disclaimer information on the right toward the bottom of our front page, talking about, well, it has links to our information at the SEC, the history of our company, information, the clean record of of ourselves and our advisors, those kinds of things. Those are very important to keep in mind too. But those are the couple of most important things to look at would be our blog and our podcast. And yeah,
Highly recommend
I'm sorry.
you go first.
Oh, there's a lot of information there in terms of how to get started working with us. Well, an easy way to do that is to reach out to one of us via email or or via phone. All of our phone numbers are going to be in the footer there too, so you can look at those. The Send us an email, give us a call, reach out. We're available to talk.
Thanks so much. Yeah, we are available. We love doing this. We love talking to you. So reach out if you enjoyed this conversation with us. Let us know. And if you want us to do another one, Johann and I love talking. We're happy to make these things. So if there's demand for another topic you want to hear us, or if we just get a lot of questions on the same topic, we might get back on here soon and do another one of these because I really enjoyed talking to you today,
Yeah,
Johann.
yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed it too.
Thanks again, Johann, for taking the time to come on the podcast today, share about Horizons. I'm just really grateful and excited to be working here and working with you.
I'm excited about that too, and thank you so much for this. It's always terrific to be able to, to share the stories, to talk about how we got where we are, why we do what we do.
Really feel grateful to tell that story and just want to thank everybody again for listening.
Me too.
I'm also required to share a disclaimer here that the content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for personalized professional investing advice. Only you and your financial advisor can determine what the right investments are for you. I am an investment advisor representative of Horizon Sustainable Financial Services, Inc., an SEC registered investment advisor. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the host and or guests and does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Horizons. Horizons Sustainable Financial Services financial professionals do not render tax, accounting, or legal advice. Full disclosures are available at the disclosures and disclaimers link located at the bottom of the Horizons website at horizonssfs.com. Click below and find that there in the description. Thanks again for listening and keep on growing.